Hi, thank you for taking the time to join the Paralegal as a Rainmaker Paralegal Accountability. Before we get started, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Lakeisha Beeler. I'm the founder of Agility Paralegal Service. I earned my MBA from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, my bachelor's in accounting from the University of Phoenix, and an associate's degree in legal assistance studies from San Diego City College, and I'm currently pursuing my master's in paralegal studies from George Washington University. Most of my experience has been working in legal settings in either a law firm setting or in banks. I've also assisted attorneys that worked on boards for various business improvement districts here in San Diego, California, and I've also worked with the attorney on the board at Junior Achievement of San Diego. And so I have a lot of experience with the law in banks, law firms, and things of that nature. I'm a member of the American Bar Association and the National Federation of Paralegal Associations. So I just wanted to provide a brief overview of today's topic, which is paralegal accountability and what this topic entails. Paralegal accountability, some may view it at the same as paralegal regulation, but it's a little bit different. Paralegal accountability discusses why the need for paralegal regulation is always a topic that's discussed in order to either further the paralegal profession or in order to protect the public. Now, paralegal accountability is actually a built-in method for paralegals and also for attorneys to be able to manage the paralegals' duty and their obligations to clients and then also to the firm or organization that they work for. So today we're going to go over why it's paralegal accountability is different from responsibility, the ineffectiveness of having ethical standards if there is no accountability, and then why the lacks of ethical standards and the lack of accountability usually go hand in hand. We'll then go on to discuss the various paralegal associations and their contributions to creating some type of accountability within the paralegal profession, and also some state bar associations that have created either separate sections for paralegals or certification that in essence creates some type of accountability within the profession, and then also state regulations and their contributions to paralegal accountability. So first we're going to start and talk about the difference between responsibility and accountability, because some might think that these two things are the same, because if an individual is responsible, then it is often believed that there is some type of accountability, but that is not always the case. Being responsible is saying that let's say you're a responsible paralegal, so you do the duties of your job. Accountability is saying that you have some type of checks and balance that it's built into your particular career. So that follows you after you leave your office, after you finish your duties on the job. Accountability is something that you embody as a professional and not just how you operate when you're on a job. Now, the current non-regulation, it actually pretty much leaves the responsibility for paralegals to conduct themselves in the correct manner and follow certain ethical standards that maybe attorneys would have to follow. It leaves it up to the paralegal to do so, or their supervising attorney. And this calls for the person to be responsible, and that trusting that that particular individual is going to be responsible without any type of oversight by any type of regulatory body or any type of state regulation that requires the person to do so. Now, accountability, it does not rely on an individual's choice to be a responsible professional, but it requires that particular individual adhere to certain ethical obligations. Now, the key difference between responsibility and accountability is choice. With responsibility, a person has the choice if they're going to be responsible or not, if they're going to do something that they should or should not do. They're making that decision. They're making that choice. With accountability, that person does not have a choice. If they operate within that profession, they can either follow that ethical standard, that canon, whatever it is, or they will no longer be a part of that profession. I'll give a perfect example. In the news recently, in the ABA Journal, there's an article about an attorney that got disbarred because the attorney charged more for fees to clients in a fin lawsuit. This person was disbarred. The attorney had a responsibility to their client that was a part of them being a member of the bar. When this particular attorney did not adhere to this particular ethical standard, they were then disbarred, meaning that they can no longer operate in this profession. So it's not a choice, even though this attorney operated as if it was a choice to follow rules regarding client billing. Those standards and the accountability to the state bar made that not an option to follow that particular standard or not. So that's the difference between responsibility and accountability. The choice is eliminated. As it stands now, with paralegals not being regulated, it leaves the choice for them to follow certain standards or not, or it leaves it up to their supervisor attorney to make sure that they're following these particular standards. But this is something that is far too serious to be left in the hands of an individual, an attorney, or a firm to make sure that a paralegal is following certain standards. So the difference between responsibility and accountability sheds the light on why accountability is something that is necessary, and with that accountability comes some type of oversight, some type of body that regulates and manages and oversees that the individual or paralegal is adhering to these particular standards. Now, currently, how paralegals, their standards, how it stands as of today, for the most part, except for, and even I'll say in California, because California, we're the only state, I'm here in San Diego, California, we're the only state that regulates paralegals, but even that is lax because there's no oversight. It's left up to supervising attorneys to ensure that paralegals adhere to these standards. Well, we can trust that this is being done, or we can go based off of statistics with a audit that was done by the California State Bar to ensure that attorneys were taking their CLE credits, and most of them that were audited failed that audit. So as part of the regulation here in California, paralegals are to take certain CLE credits. Well, when the attorneys themselves, some of the attorneys themselves are not adhering to this, then, can it be left in their hands to ensure that their paralegals, their employees, are adhering to this particular regulation? That brings that into question. So again, having some oversight, having accountability, mandatory accountability, eliminates this guesswork of knowing whether a paralegal is adhering to certain ethical standards or not. Now, again, as I want to bring up the issue of choice. I mentioned before that the difference between responsibility and accountability is choice. that the person is having the choice whether they want to be responsible or if they're not. Versus with accountability, there is no choice. If a person wants to operate in that profession, they have to adhere to these particular standards, or they can no longer be a part of that profession. Now, paralegals are still operating from the standpoint of having a choice, which has to be eliminated if there's ever to be a professional paralegal role. Right now, I don't believe there is a professional paralegal across the board standard, because there's so many different views on what a paralegal does, and the accountability is not there. In order for a profession to be considered to be so, there is some type of accountability that's built into the profession itself, and it's not relying on that individual to adhere to it. There's some oversight body. Now, because of human nature and the inherent flawlessness within us, and I say that meaning that even when the forefounders created our laws, when they created our Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights, constitutions, laws, it was built on the notion that men cannot govern themselves. There's always that chance where someone can make a wrong choice, or they can act outside of the bounds of law. Therefore, there was something built within it in order for there to be some type of checks and balance within it because of human nature. That's something that was done when the forefathers created the Constitution, when the government structure was set up. It's set up to have checks and balance. You don't have one government body. You don't have the legislator having all the power. You don't have the executive branch having all of the power to make decisions. There's checks and balances. And the reason why this is created, because of human nature. That being said, when responsibility to adhere to ethical standards is left to an individual, or left to someone that has a stake in that individual complying with that particular law, or saying that they have, and if they really haven't, then it kind of leaves this up in the air as far as if it's really being done or not. Now, ethical standards can never, for it to be something that is used as a method to regulate a profession and to protect the public, the willingness of the individual to adhere to it has to be removed. A person, the choice has to be removed, and it has to be something that's mandated. Like, I'll use the example again of an attorney. Attorney does not have the choice if they're going to follow the ethics of their particular state bar. They can follow them or not, but if they choose not to follow them, they can no longer call themselves an attorney and operate within that particular role. So that has to totally be eliminated in order for accountability, in order for the public to be protected by individuals that work as paralegals. Now, I want to discuss the correlation between the lax ethical standards and the lack of accountability. And when I say lack ethical standards, I'm speaking on paralegals that operate and that do not adhere to the ethical standards of the attorneys that they work up under. Because by definition, a paralegal is someone that is delegated legal work that an attorney would normally do outside of, giving legal advice, outside of those things that a paralegal can't do, but those things delegated to them. So with that, a paralegal has to know what their particular ethical standards are. Now, the lax of adhering to this or to these standards, I believe there's a correlation between there being no accountability across the board for paralegals. Now, a lot of times when we hear issues of misbillings and client complaints, we hear about the attorney that's being disbarred, because a paralegal can't be disbarred. There's really no ramification for the paralegal except for them being fired. But if this issue is looked at and dissected, paralegals have a lot of interaction with clients, and they also have a lot of they have a hand in the billing. So if this is done incorrectly, there's really nothing that can be done to the paralegal, but there is something that can happen to that particular firm or that particular attorney. So when a paralegal is not held to these standards, then it's going to, in which it does, and it's in the different rules governing the use of paralegals, that the lawyer is going to be held responsible, and the lawyers will continue to be held responsible, because there's nothing that can be done to paralegal, because there is no governing body, there's no accountability system built into the profession. Now, the two are correlated, because if an individual knows if they know that there is no system in place, no structure, no governing agency that oversees their actions within the profession, then there's really no motivation on the part of that individual to make sure that they are following standards the way that they're supposed to, that they are, and I'll give an example of returning client calls. That is a rule of professional conduct. A lot of paralegals may not know that. So if they're getting calls from a client, that client's calls may just be viewed as a nuisance, and their paralegal may not return the calls to the client. Well, when the client gets frustrated with this and they file a complaint to the bar, well, this is going to fall on the lap of the attorney. But the paralegal, again, being lax in that area of adhering to ethical standards because they don't even know that it exists, is not going to adhere to this, and it's going to cause issues for the lawyer, for the attorney, or for that firm. So there is a correlation between the two. The lack ethical standard and the lack of accountability. If the accountability was built into the profession, then the ethical standards and adherence to that would automatically follow. Now, there are methods, associations, regulations in place right now that pretty much build accountability or have some type of accountability for paralegals. But again, these are voluntary. And when a person has a choice to follow standards or not, then it kind of waters down those particular standards because a person doesn't have to. But we're going to discuss accountability in these particular areas because they are models for accountability and what it looks like in the profession overall. So I first want to start off by talking about the accountability in paralegal associations. You have the national paralegal associations, and then you also have regional paralegal associations. And all of these associations have canons or ethical rules that those within that association have to adhere to. And so this creates some sense of accountability for those individuals that volunteer or that are a part of that association. And those are standards like how to conduct themselves with clients, just different standards. And a lot of these are in line with the attorneys, their state bar ethical rules. But this is some way of being able to have accountability built into the profession. And then you also have state bar associations that contribute to paralegal accountability. And you have different states that have certified paralegal, different certification bodies and different credentials for paralegals. But again, these are voluntary, but they are models to be able to look at accountability and what it entails within the profession overall. Then you also have state bars that have separate sections for paralegals. I know Texas has a separate paralegal division, and then you have Florida, North Carolina, and other states that have certified paralegal credentials for paralegals. And again, these are voluntary, but they are models to look at what accountability looks like, what the continuing education looks like, what these particular associations are looking for the professionals within that particular association or with those particular credentials. Then you also have state regulations that in some way build accountability into the profession. And I mentioned before that California is the only state that has a mandatory regulation for paralegals. So it's not like with the paralegal associations where it's voluntary and someone joins the association, so then they have to adhere to those particular rules of that association. It's a little bit different where all paralegals here in California have to adhere to the business and profession code that defines a paralegal as far as what experience an individual has to have, the education that an individual has to have before they can even call themselves a paralegal and use that title. But it also builds into it a aspect of being able to maintain that credential. So it's similar to attorneys that have to have continuing education courses in order to maintain that credential. And this is a way to protect the public because of the changing laws. And even with the changing delivery of legal services, the continuing legal education requirement is mandating that individuals within the profession keep abreast of these changes so that they can best serve their clients. Because an individual that is not educated and is not knowledgeable about changes can make errors with the client. If there's a rule change and an individual is still going by the old rule, then they may make some mistakes that can have serious consequences for their client. So this regulation is a way at the end of the day is protecting the client. And so accountability for paralegals is not just about the profession overall and those individuals operating in a profession. It's really a way of being able to protect the public. And in any profession, when accountability is built within it, it's a way of being able to protect those particular professionals are serving. With doctors, you have that. With any profession, there is accountability that's built within it. And that again is a way to be able to protect the public, because when an individual comes to someone for service, they may not have the knowledge or the skills or even know where to look to make sure that that particular person is up to par. The best way to be able to do that is for the regulatory body to set certain standards so that the person going to that particular professional, they already know. That's a way for them to say, okay, it's okay for me to go to this particular individual because I know that they have met this criteria by the state or by this particular association. Not to say that just because they are, have the credential or whatever the case may be, that, there won't be issues with that individual, but it is a way for there to be something that the public can look to know that the person has the skills to be able to provide them with that service that they are going to them for. So accountability, again, is not just about the individual and making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing in the profession just for the sake of knowing it. It's about being able to protect the public, and so that the public can have some way to ensure that those individuals that they are entrusting with whatever the issue is, their health, and in the case with dealing with paralegals, with their legal matter, that they know that they have the expertise and the skills and the character to be able to provide them that particular service. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to get in contact with us. Our contact information is here. The phone number is 866-255-7175. And you can also reach us on the web at www.agilityservicesabbreviated.com or by email. Our email address is rainmakers@agilityservices.com. And again, my name is Lakeisha Beeler, and today's topic is the paralegal as a rainmaker, paralegal accountability. And that topic is important to the whole concept of the paralegal being a rainmaker. The paralegal being someone within the legal profession that can provide and that can be a significant contributor to a firm or an organization that they work for. But without accountability, this cannot happen, because an attorney, a firm, has to know that the individual that they are entrusting with a particular case or whatever it is, or being able to be an integral part of their legal team, that they know that they have the skills, they know that they have the knowledge, they know that they have the character to be able to provide them with that service that they're calling for them for, that they can entrust them. No one's going to do that with someone that they can't count on. Accountability, when it's built into the legal profession, it already provides that particular attorney, that firm, that organization with the confidence that that individual has the skill set, the character, whatever, to do that. That's what accountability is all about too. It's about being able to build that within the profession, for it not to be something that's a choice and that's voluntary, but that's something that's mandatory for someone to be able to operate within that profession. Just like with an attorney. An attorney does not have the choice whether they're going to adhere to ethical standards or not. They have to in order to operate. And some may argue that paralegals is mandatory for them too, but it's really not, because there's nothing that keeps them in line with those standards. A paralegal can make a mistake. Worst case scenario, they'll be fired, but they can go across town or go across state and find another paralegal job. But not the same for an attorney, because of the mandatory accountability built into the profession. If an attorney does not adhere to those ethical standards, they can be disbarred and they can go to another state or another company if they want to, but they can't operate in the role of an attorney because they don't have the license to do so. Because once they did not comply with that particular standard within the profession, then that license was no longer able to be used by that particular individual. So that's what accountability is about. It's about eliminating choice for individuals that operate as paralegals and making it mandatory. And this, at the end of the day, protects the public, and it also provides employers and clients with the confidence that that particular individual has that particular skill set, knowledge, and the character to be able to operate within the profession. And it even actually eliminates a step for a client or an attorney, because they can look at that particular whatever that, let's say it's a mandatory paralegal association, whatever the case may be, a mandatory credential. Once that person holds that, then the client, the organization, the firm, the attorney already knows that that person has those particular skill sets, the particular education, they're adhering to what needs to be adhered to, then at that point they just need to check, any other information to make sure that it is the particular individual still in good standing. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to get in contact with us via any of these particular methods.